The void of space was cold and silent as Commander Marcus Cole watched the enemy ships closing in on the royal transport. He had served the Volanthi Empire for 7 years now, and in all that time he had never seen odds this bad 3 Kethrani warships. Surrounded the small diplomatic vessel carrying Princess Celera to the peace negotiations on Tethros Station. The princess was only 19 years old, and this was her first official mission as a representative of the throne. Now she might not survive. To see her 20th birthday, Marcus stood on the bridge and counted the enemy fires launching from the warship's 47 small attack crafts spread out in a hunting formation designed to overwhelm their defenses. The Volanthi captain turned to his crew with fear in his glowing amber eyes. All hands prepare for emergency jump. He commanded. We cannot win this fight. Marcus stepped forward and grabbed the captain by his arm. If we jump now, the fighters will follow our trail, and we will lead them straight to the fleet. The captain pulled away from the human with disgust on his copper-skinned face. Then, what do you suggest? Human? We have 1 escort ship and a transport with minimal weapons. I suggest you give me a fighter and let me buy you time. The bridge went silent as every Volanthi officer turned to stare at the human commander. Princess Celera emerged from the protected section of the bridge where she had been watching the situation unfold. She was tall like all her people, standing nearly 7 feet with skin that shimmered like polished bronze and eyes that burned with inner golden light. Even in danger, she carried herself with the grace of royalty. Commander Cole, she said in a voice that was both soft and commanding. You would face 47 fighters alone? Marcus met her gaze without flinching. I would face 1,000 if it meant getting you home safely. Your Highness. Something flickered in the princess's luminous eyes, but she said nothing. The captain laughed bitterly. 1 human against the Kethrani raider elite? You will die in minutes. Maybe. Marcus admitted. But those will be minutes you can use to get the princess to safety. He did not wait for permission. Marcus ran to the hangar bay and climbed into the only remaining fighter. It was a Volanthi interceptor designed for pilots with longer arms and different reflexes. But he had trained on these ships for years. He launched into the black void and turned toward the approaching swarm of enemy craft. The first Kethrani fighter exploded before its pilot. Even knew Marcus was there. Flew like a man possessed, weaving through their formation with moves that should have been impossible. The Kethrani were excellent pilots, but they had never fought a human before. They did not understand how a species with such short lives could be so reckless with the Marcus. Destroyed 19 fighters in the first 8 minutes of combat. His ship took hit after hit, but he kept flying even as systems failed around him. When a plasma blast finally cracked his cockpit and his life support began to fail, he did not retreat. He opened the damaged canopy and continued fighting in the hard vacuum of space. Blood froze on his cracked visor as the cold tried to kill him. His lungs burned as the last of his oxygen ran out. Still he fought on, using his failing ship as a weapon, ramming it into a cluster of enemy fighters, and then pulling himself through the wreckage to continue the battle with nothing but his combat knife and his fury. The Kethrani had never seen anything like it. 6 more of them died before they finally brought him down. When Volanthi reinforcements arrived 20 minutes later, they found the princess safe and the human floating among the debris field. His heart had stopped twice during the battle. His body was broken in 17 places. 90% of his blood had either frozen or leaked out into space. The medic said he was dead. They said saving him was impossible. Princess Celera stood over his body and spoke with a voice that allowed no argument. Save him, or I will find doctors who can. For 3 weeks, Marcus drifted between life and death while the finest Volanthi surgeons rebuilt his shattered body. They replaced bones with metal and filled his veins with synthetic blood. They patched his organs and sealed his wounds and marveled that his stubborn human heart kept beating through it all. When he finally opened his eyes, The first thing he saw was the princess sitting beside his bed. She looked tired, as if she had not slept in days. "Your Highness," he croaked through damaged vocal cords, "you should not be here. I have been here every day since they brought you aboard," she said simply. Marcus tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. "The captain? The crew? Did everyone make it?" "Everyone survived because of you." She leaned forward and placed her hand over his. Her skin was warm against his cold fingers. "In my culture, Commander, when someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that can never be repaid. I was just doing my duty, Your Highness." "No," she said firmly. "You did far more than duty required, and we both know it." She stood and looked down at him with those burning golden eyes. "By the ancient laws of my people, I claim the right of protection over you." "Marcus Cole," he blinked in confusion. "I do not understand. You saved my life, and now I'm responsible for yours." "Ah." Small smile crossed her copper lips. "You belong to me now, Commander, and I protect what is mine." The court was outraged when they heard the news. A princess of the blood bonded to a human? It was unthinkable and disgraceful, and against every tradition they held dear. But Celera silenced them with a single cold glare that promised consequences for anyone who challenged her decision. For 3 years after that day, Marcus served as her personal guard. He was her shadow, her shield, and her closest companion. He protected her from assassination, attempts, and political schemes. He stood beside her through boring ceremonies and dangerous missions. She taught him the 17 forms of Volante court etiquette, and he taught her human card games and jokes that made her laugh slowly. Without either of them meaning for it to happen, something grew between them. It was something neither of them spoke about, because speaking it aloud would make it real, and real things could be taken away. Marcus had spent his whole life never belonging anywhere. The Volante saw humans as useful tools at best and annoying pests at worst. But when Celera looked at him, she saw something more. She saw a man worth saving, and that was more than anyone had ever given him before. Then the old queen died, and everything they had built together began to crumble. Queen Valenthia had ruled the Volante Empire for 200 years, and her death sent shockwaves across 40 star systems. Marcus stood beside Celera at the funeral ceremony and watched as thousands of nobles bowed their heads in grief. The old queen had been hard and sometimes cruel, but she had kept the empire stable through 3 wars and countless political storms. Now that stability was about to be tested by ancient law, the throne could not pass directly to Princess Celera. Was still considered too young by Volante standards. With 1 more year before she reached the age of ascension, until then, a regent would rule in her place. That regent was the Sara, the dead queen's younger sister. Marcus had seen the Sara many times at court functions over the years. She was tall even for a Volante, with skin like dark copper and eyes that glowed with cold amber light. She had been married twice, and both her husbands had died under mysterious circumstances. The court whispered about her, but no one dared speak openly. 3 days after the funeral, Marcus received a summons to the throne room. He walked the length of that enormous crystal hall alone, his boots echoing on the polished floor. The room was designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Massive columns of white stone rose toward a ceiling painted with scenes of Volante conquest. At the far end sat the crystal throne, and on that throne sat Deseret. Watched him approach with the patient stillness of a predator waiting for prey. "Commander Marcus Cole," she said when he finally reached the base of the throne. "The human who saved my niece from the Kethrani raiders." Marcus bowed in the formal Volante style. "Your Majesty, I have read your service record many times over the past few days." She stood and descended the steps toward him, her ceremonial robes flowing behind her like dark water. 43 confirmed kills in combat, 17 official commendations for bravery. 4 separate instances where you were declared clinically dead before being revived. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell the metallic sweetness of her perfume. Tell me, Commander, what drives a creature with such a short lifespan to fight so hard for a cause that is not his own? Marcus kept his face carefully neutral. Duty, Your Majesty. Duty, she repeated, rolling the word around in her mouth like she was tasting it. How wonderfully simple. How delightfully human. She began to circle him slowly, studying him from every angle like a merchant examining goods at market. My niece seems quite fond of you, Commander. Some might even say inappropriately fond. The princess honors me with her trust. Indeed she does. Desara completed her circle and faced him again. Humans are fascinating creatures. Did you know that? So fragile, so short-lived, and yet so remarkably persistent. I am pleased that Your Majesty finds us interesting. Oh, I find you more than interesting. Commander, her smile was cold and did not reach her eyes. I find you useful, and I have decided to claim that usefulness for myself. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression blank. Your Majesty? You are being reassigned, Commander Cole, effective immediately, to my personal guard. The words hit him like a physical blow. Reassigned? But my oath is to Princess Celera. Your oath is to the throne, Desara said sharply. And I am the throne now. At least until my niece comes of age. She reached out and traced a finger along one of the scars on his jaw. A souvenir from a fight 2 years ago. You will serve me as you served her, with loyalty and dedication and that wonderful human stubbornness that makes your kind so entertaining. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then I will have you discharged from Imperial service, Desara said softly. And humans, without Imperial sponsorship, rarely survive long in Volanti space. She leaned closer, her glowing eyes boring into his. Accidents happen. Commander, pirates attack unprotected ships. Airlocks malfunction. Food becomes contaminated. The threat was clear, and Marcus understood perfectly. If he refused, he would die. And dead, he could not protect Celera from whatever schemes the Tsar was planning. When do I begin, Your Majesty? The Tsar's cold smile widened into something that might have been satisfaction. Immediately. Your quarters have already been moved to the wing adjacent to my chambers, and your new uniform is waiting for you. She turned and walked back toward her throne. You may inform my niece of your reassignment yourself. I imagine she will want to hear it from you, rather than through official channels. Marcus bowed again and left the throne room with his mind racing. He found Celera in her private garden, surrounded by the blue flowers she loved. When he told her what had happened, her face went pale and then flushed with fury. She cannot do this, Celera said through clenched teeth. She can, Marcus replied quietly. The Regent has full authority over military assignments. You are not just military. You are mine. The possessiveness in her voice made something warm bloom in his chest, even as the situation grew darker. I know. But the law does not see it that way. Celera began to pace, her robes swirling around her ankles. I will challenge her. I will demand your return in open court, and she will refuse. And you will look weak before the nobles. He caught her arm gently and stopped her pacing. Listen to me, Your Highness. The Tsar is playing a game. I do not yet understand, but I intend to find out what it is. What do you mean? She wants me close to her, which means I will be close to her secrets. Understanding dawned in Celera's golden eyes. You mean to spy on her. I mean to protect you, the same as I always have. Just from a different position. Celera was quiet for a long moment. It is dangerous, Marcus. If she suspects you are not truly loyal to her, then I will make certain she does not suspect. He squeezed her hand and then released it. 1 year. Your Highness, in 1 year you will take the throne and everything will be different. 1 year is a long time. I have waited longer for things less important." Their eyes met and 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. Then Marcus stepped back and bowed formally. "I must report to my new post. Your Highness, the Regent Queen does not like to be kept waiting." Celira watched him go with something broken in her expression. Marcus carried that image with him as he walked to his new quarters and put on his new uniform and reported to his new mistress. He would play the loyal soldier. For as long as necessary, he would watch and listen and learn, and when the time came, he would be ready. 6 months passed, and Marcus learned more about the Regent Queen than he ever wanted to know. Thesara kept him at her side constantly. Like a prized pet she wanted to show off to visitors, he stood behind her throne during court sessions and walked 3 steps behind her through the palace corridors. He tasted her food before she ate it and checked her chambers before she slept. The other guards resented his presence, but the Tsar silenced any complaints with sharp words and sharper punishments. "You see how she favors the human," the nobles whispered to each other when they thought no one was listening. "She means to bond him as her consort. A human sitting beside the throne? The old queen would die of shame if she were not already dead." Marcus heard all of it and pretended not to care. He played the role of the loyal soldier perfectly, responding to every command with crisp efficiency and showing no emotion when the Tsar tested him with cruel remarks about human weakness. But behind that mask of obedience, his mind never stopped working. Thesara had underestimated him badly. She thought he was a simple warrior, strong and capable, but ultimately just a tool to be used. She did not realize that 7 years in Volante service had taught him to read their politics like a human might read a book. She did not know that every meeting he attended and every conversation he overheard was being carefully stored in his memory, and she certainly did not suspect the network of informants he had built among the palace servants. The Volante rarely noticed humans unless they needed something from them. This blindness worked in Marcus's favor. The human servants who cleaned the chambers and delivered the meals and maintained the equipment moved through the palace like ghosts. They saw everything and heard everything, and they were fiercely loyal to the commander who had always treated them with respect. Through them, Marcus maintained secret contact with Celerities, past messages hidden in laundry baskets and food trays. They reported on the movements of suspicious nobles and the arrival of unexpected visitors. Piece by piece, Marcus assembled a picture of what the Tsar was planning. It started with the military movements. Thesar had been quietly reassigning officers throughout the fleet, replacing commanders loyal to Celira with those who owed their positions to Harad. First, Marcus thought she was simply consolidating power, a normal move for any new ruler. But then he noticed the pattern. The officers being removed were not just loyal to Celerithi, were the ones who had served during the Kethrani conflict, the ones who might recognize certain faces or certain ship configurations that made Marcus suspicious. Then came the diplomatic messages. Thera received regular communications from off-world contacts that she always handled personally. The messages were encrypted and she never discussed their contents with anyone, but one of the human servants who cleaned her private office noticed something interesting. The encryption protocols matched those used by Kethrani military intelligence, the same Kethrani who had attacked Celira's ship 3 years ago, the same Kethrani that Marcus had killed by the dozens to save the princess. That was when Marcus understood the terrible truth. The attack on Celira had not been random, it had been planned, coordinated, specifically targeted to kill the heir to the throne, and the Tsar had been involved from the very beginning. With that knowledge burning in his mind, Marcus began to dig deeper. He took risks he would never have taken before, searching the Tsar's quarters when she was away and copying files from her private terminal. What he found made his blood run cold. Thesara had been planning to seize the throne for over a decade. The old queen had suspected something was wrong, but died before She could act now. Desara needed only to eliminate Celera before the Ascension ceremony, and the throne would be hers forever. Kithrani raiders had failed 3 years ago because of one stubborn human who refused to let the princess die this time. Desara would not leave anything to chance. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. During the Ascension ceremony, when the palace would be crowded with visitors and security would be stretched thin, a Kithrani strike team would infiltrate the lower levels. They would reach the ceremonial hall through the old maintenance tunnels that most people had forgotten. Existent Celera would die in what appeared to be a terrorist attack. Desara would declare martial law, postpone any transfer of power, and rule as regent indefinitely. By the time anyone suspected the truth, all the evidence would be destroyed, and all the witnesses would be dead. Marcus spent 3 sleepless nights trying to figure out how to stop. Ive could not go to the authorities, because Desara had replaced most of them with her own people. He could not warn Celera directly because any unusual contact between them would be noticed and reported. He could not even be certain which guards he could trust and which were part of the conspiracy in the end. He realized that he would have to handle this himself. One human against a trained strike team of Kithrani warriors. One human against a regent queen with the power of an empire at her command. The odds were terrible, but Marcus had faced terrible odds. Before he sent one final message to Celera through his network of servants, it contained only 3 words. "Trust me tonight, then." He began to prepare for the fight of his life. He hid weapons in strategic locations throughout the palace. He memorized the layout of the maintenance tunnels and identified the best points for ambush. He arranged for certain doors to be left unlocked and certain guards to be called away at crucial moments. Dara noticed none of it. She was too focused on her grand scheme to pay attention to the movements of one insignificant human. That was her greatest mistake. She had forgotten what Marcus Cole was capable of when someone he cared about was in danger. She had forgotten that humans did not measure threats by size or strength or numbers. They measured threats by determination, and there was no one in the galaxy more determined than Marcus Cole when it came to protecting Princess Celera. Night before the ceremony, Marcus stood at his post outside Desara's chambers and listened to her laugh with her conspirators about how smoothly everything was proceeding. "Tomorrow," she said, "the Empire would finally be hers." Tomorrow, she said, the human would learn his true place in the universe. Marcus said nothing and showed nothing, but inside, a cold fire burned. Tomorrow would come, and Desara would learn exactly what humans were made of. The night of the Ascension ceremony arrived with all the pomp and ceremony the Volanti Empire could produce. Thousands of nobles filled the great crystal hall, dressed in their finest robes and glittering with precious metals. Musicians played ancient songs of power and glory, while servants moved through the crowd offering food and drink. Princess Celera stood at the center of it all, wearing the white and gold ceremonial dress of an heir about to claim her throne. She looked calm and composed, but Marcus knew her well enough to see the tension in her shoulders. She had received his message, and she was waiting for whatever was about to happen. Regent Queen Desara sat on the crystal throne above the crowd, watching the proceedings with barely concealed satisfaction. In a few hours her niece would be dead, and all of this would belong to her forever. Marcus stood at his post near the main entrance. Just another guard in a palace full of guards. No one paid any attention to him. That was exactly what he wanted. As the ceremony progressed and the crowd became more focused on the rituals taking place at the center of the hall, Marcus slipped away into the shadows. He moved through the palace like a ghost, using the servant passages and maintenance corridors he had memorized over the past 6 months. The Kithrani strike team would be entering through the old tunnels beneath the palace. He intended to meet them there. Marcus found the entrance to the tunnels behind a storage room that had not been used in decades. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled of age and neglect. Checked his weapons one final time. A plasma pistol with 3 charge packs, a combat knife, and a set of flash grenades he had stolen from the armory. It was not much against 12 trained Kethrani warriors, but it would have to be enough. He descended into the darkness. The tunnels were old and cramped, built centuries ago for maintenance access, and long since forgotten water dripped from cracks in the ceiling, and strange sounds echoed from deeper in the network. Marcus moved carefully, testing each step before putting his weight down. The Kethrani were already inside. He could hear them ahead, moving with the quiet efficiency of professional killers. They spoke in low voices, confirming positions and checking equipment. Marcus counted 12 distinct voices, exactly as his intelligence had suggested. Took a deep breath and prepared himself for what was about to happen. The first Kethrani died without ever knowing Marcus was there. He came up behind the rear guard and drove his knife into the weak point where the warrior's helmet met his neck armor. The body collapsed silently, and Marcus caught it before it could hit the ground. 1 down. 11 to go. The second and third kills were almost as easy. The Kethrani were confident in their mission and did not expect anyone to be waiting for them in these forgotten tunnels. By the time they realized something was wrong, Marcus had already cut their numbers by a quarter. Then the real fight began. The remaining Kethrani were elite warriors, veterans of dozens of raids and hundreds of kills. They reacted to the threat with professional speed, spreading out to cover each other and scanning the darkness for their attacker. Marcus threw a flash grenade into their midst and charged while they were still blinded. His plasma pistol took down 2 more before they could recover. Then he was among them, too close for them to use their rifles without risking friendly fire. The combat became brutal and personal. Marcus fought with everything he had, using every dirty trick he had learned in 7 years of Volanthi service. He broke bones and crushed throats, and drove his knife into any gap in armor he could find. The Kethrani fought back with equal ferocity. A blade sliced across his ribs, cutting deep into muscle. Another caught his shoulder, sending blood spraying across the tunnel wall. A third opened a gash on his forehead that sent blood streaming into his eyes. Till he fought on. He thought of Celira standing in that crystal hall, waiting for death to come for her. He thought of all the years they had spent together, all the moments they had shared, all the words they had never spoken. Thought of the life they might have if he could just survive the next few minutes. That thought gave him strength when his body wanted to quit. 1 by 1 the Kethrani fell. Marcus took more wounds with each kill, but he refused to stop. When the last warrior finally collapsed at his feet, Marcus stood alone in a tunnel filled with bodies. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own. His left arm hung useless at his side, and he could barely see through the gore dripping into his eyes, but he was alive. And the strike team was Noth, climbed out of the tunnels and made his way through the palace toward the Sara's private chambers. The Regent Queen would be expecting news of her nieces. Death. She was about to receive a very different kind of visitor. Marcus left bloody footprints on the pristine floor as he walked through halls filled with servants who stared at him in shock. Did not stop to explain. He did not stop for anything. Thessara's guards tried to block his path, but he moved past them like they were not even there. They were too surprised by his appearance to react in time. He pushed opened the doors to her chambers and found her standing by the window, dressed in ceremonial robes and clearly waiting for someone. When she turned and saw him, her expression went through several stages: confusion, then recognition, then something that might have been fear. "Commander Cole," she said slowly, "you are supposed to be at your post." Marcus walked toward her, leaving a trail of blood on her expensive carpet. "Your assassins are dead." The Zara's face went pale beneath her copper skin. I do not know what you Cavis communications. Recordings, evidence, Marcus interrupted. The Gethrani leadership already knows you betrayed them, and they are very interested in discussing terms with the true heir to the throne. It was a bluff. He had no such communications, and the Gethrani leadership knew nothing, but Desara did not know that her hand moved toward a hidden panel in the wall. Probably an alarm or a weapon. Marcus moved faster, despite his wounds, despite his exhaustion. He crossed the distance between them before she could complete the motion. He did not kill her. That was not his right, but when the palace guards arrived minutes later, summoned by Celira, who had been waiting for his signal, they found the Regent Queen restrained on the floor, and the blood-soaked human standing over her with a datapad full of evidence. He had gathered over 6 months of patient watching. The princess needs to see this, Marcus said to the stunned guards. All of it. Then his legs finally gave out, and he collapsed beside the woman who had tried to destroy everything he cared about. The last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was Celira running through the door, her white ceremonial robes billowing behind her as she rushed to his side. She was alive. She was safe. Everything else could wait. Marcus woke in a medical bay filled with soft light and the quiet hum of healing machines. His body ached in ways he did not have words for, and every breath felt like a small victory, but he was alive, and that was more than he had expected. When he walked into those tunnels, he turned his head and found Celira sitting beside his bed, just as she had done 4 years ago after the battle in the Hollow Nebula. You need to stop doing this, she said quietly. Doing what? Almost dying to save me. Marcus tried to smile, but his face hurt too much. I will consider changing my habits after you stop needing to be saved. Celira laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. Then her expression grew serious. Desara has been arrested, and her allies are falling over themselves to confess and beg for mercy. The Gethrani? Their leadership has officially denied any involvement and offered substantial reparations to avoid war. She reached out and took his hand in hers. It is over. Marcus, you stopped her. We stopped her, he corrected. I could not have done any of it without your trust. Celira was quiet for a moment. The trial will be swift, and the verdict is not in doubt, but the ceremonial requirements mean I cannot take the throne until the matter is fully resolved. How long? 3 days. Marcus nodded and immediately regretted the movement as pain shot through his neck. I should be able to stand by then. The doctors say you should not be able to stand for at least 2 weeks. The doctors do not know me very well. Celira squeezed his hand and stood up. Rest now. Commander, that is an order from your future queen. She left the room, and Marcus closed his eyes and slept without dreams for the first time in months. 3 days later, the coronation ceremony took place in the same crystal hall where Desara had planned to commit murder. Marcus stood in the crowd wearing his dress uniform, his wounds bandaged but hidden beneath the formal fabric he had refused to watch from a bed, and no one had been willing to argue with us. The ceremony was ancient and beautiful, full of ritual words and symbolic gestures that stretched back thousands of years. Lyra moved through each step with grace and dignity, accepting the crown and the scepter and the oaths of loyalty from the assembled nobles. When the final words were spoken and the crown settled on her head, the crowd erupted in cheers. Queen Celira I. Long may she reign. Marcus cheered with the rest of them, pride swelling in his chest as he watched the woman he loved claim her rightful place. The celebration continued for hours. Nobles approached the new queen to offer congratulations, and curry-favored diplomats delivered messages. From allied systems, musicians played and dancers performed, and servants brought endless trays of food and drink. Through it all, Celira handled everything with the skill of someone born to lead, but her eyes kept finding Marcus in the crowd. Finally, When the formal requirements of the celebration had been satisfied, Celera summoned him to a private audience. The room was small and simple. Nothing like the grand throne room where she would hold official court, just 2 chairs and a window overlooking the palace. Garden Celera stood by the window. Her ceremonial robes exchanged for simpler clothing. The crown sat on a table nearby. Momentarily set aside, closed the door. She said, without turning around. Marcus did as she asked, and then stood at attention, waiting. "Do you know what the nobles have been saying?" Celera asked. "I can guess." "Your Majesty, they say you are too close to me, and that it is inappropriate for a queen to show such favor to a human." "They are probably right." Celera turned to face him. "Do you believe that?" "I believe that your reputation matters, and that I would never want to damage it." "That is very diplomatic," she said with a slight smile. "But I ask what you believe, not what you think is wise." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I believe that I would die for you without hesitation, and I believe that if you asked me to leave, I would go even though it would destroy me. And if I asked you to stay, then I would stay forever." Celera crossed the distance between them and stood close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin. "4 years ago, you told me that you would face 1,000 fighters to keep me safe. I remember. You have bled for me more times than I can count, and you have never asked for anything in return." "I never needed anything in return." Celera reached up and touched his face gently. "What if I want to give you something anyway?" Marcus caught her hand and held it against his cheek. "What are you offering, Your Majesty?" "Everything," she said simply. "A place at my side, not as a guard, but as an equal. The court will never accept it. The court will accept what I tell them to accept. Or they can find another empire to serve." Her eyes burned. With the same fierce light he remembered. "From 4 years ago, I have spent my whole life being told what is appropriate and what is acceptable and what is expected of someone of my station. And now? Now I am the queen, and I will decide what is expected." She took a step back and studied him with those glowing golden eyes. "You once said that you did not know why humans fight so hard for things that are not theirs." "The Zara asked me that." "Yes, I have thought about it often, and I believe I understand now." "Tell me." Celera smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. "Humans fight because giving up is not in your nature, and you find things worth fighting for even when the universe tells you that you cannot have them." She took his hand in both of hers. "You have been fighting for me since the day we met, Marcus Cole. Will you let me fight for you now?" The answer was easy. It had always been easy. "I am yours, Your Majesty. Whatever that means, and for as long as you want me." Celera pulled him close, and for a moment they simply stood together. Two people who had found something worth keeping in a universe that was always trying to take things away. "The nobles will call it a scandal," Marcus murmured. "Let them. The other empires will think you have gone mad. Let them think what they want. Humans are supposed to be beneath Volanthi in every way." Celera pulled back and looked at him with fire in her eyes. "Then I suppose we will have to change what humans are supposed to be." And there in that small room, overlooking the gardens, with the crown set aside and the future waiting to be written, the new queen of the Volanthi Empire kissed the human who had bled and fought and nearly died for her more times than either of them could count outside. The Empire continued to turn politics and schemes, and ancient rivalries would demand attention soon enough. But for now there was only this moment, and these two people, and the beginning of something that would change everything years later. Historians would write about the reign of Queen Celera and her human consort. They would marvel at how one short-lived species had risen. From useful tools to respected partners, they would analyze the political implications and the cultural shifts and the diplomatic consequences, but they would never quite understand the simple truth at the heart of it all: humans were not special because they were strong or smart or long-lived. They were special because they refused to accept the limits the universe placed on them. They were special because they found things worth loving and then fought for them with everything they had. And sometimes, if they were very stubborn and very lucky, they won. Marcus Cole had won, and he intended to spend every day of his short human life making sure it was worth the fight. The end.